News First, Newsline with Faraz, Shauketaly.
And top of the morning to you. This is Newsline, live as always from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And in an ambience of politics, various things are happening on the sidelines. Some people say they're being taken in through the back door within the whole ambience of a very busy time, politically speaking. We've also got in the program to discuss these very matters a senior politician, I'd say veteran politician with a long political history, Mr. Dinesh Gunawardena. Very good morning to you, Mr.
Good morning,
Gunawardena.
Faraz.
Thank you very much for coming here.
Pleasure.
I thought I'd take up a matter that seems to be they're trying to slip it under the door in the face of everything else that's happening. And I thought that major financial decisions and so on are not made within weeks of a sort of national election, if you like, and the presidential elections are very much on the cards. So what's this business about the amendment to the People's Bank Act, the original act of which presented by your late father, Philip Gunawardena? So I was wondering whether you were paying any particular close attention to this matter, the amendment to the People's Bank Act.
Yes, Faraz. As parliamentarians, we have taken up the issue.
Right.
Not once, even when I was in opposition 20 years ago, 25 years ago, similar situation arose and we stood up for the People's Bank.
Right.
Truly, it's a People's Bank that has contributed to national development in an unprecedented manner.
Right.
People have been benefited, every household of this country from the north to the south, every business person of this country in some way, and it's an important bank in our national economy, national development, in our monetary system.
Right.
The act was proposed, of course, by my father, but he had to leave because everyone opposed the bill.
Right.
But within 1 year, late Mr. T.B. Langaratne introduced the same bill and got it through Parliament.
Right.
After formation of another government. You see, the legislators of Sri Lanka at that time, irrespective of political loyalties and their lobbying groups, stood up for the National Bank. Later on, Bank of Ceylon was also brought in as a state bank, and that was by late Felix Dias Bandaranaike's time. Late Dr. N.M. Pereira established the State Bank for National Savings Bank. These are the key institutions, the State Bank. The private sector banks also have come in, over 20 private sector banks.
Yeah. So what is the whole idea of why
The whole idea is to eventually privatize the People's Bank, which is a state bank. Initially, this amendment, People's Bank Amendment, which is being planned to be rushed through Parliament without giving enough time for parliamentarians who will be answerable to all depositors and the country to debate the issue. Enough time has to be given, one. Secondly, their amendment brings the increase of capital. Increase of capital, there is no big issue, because capital has to be increased over the years.
At the moment, it's a paltry sum of money.
It has been paltry sum because the government has been giving loans and pumping in over the years. Depositors have been coming in. Now it's been raised to 50 billion.
Right. That's a good thing.
That's okay. There are no big issue. I don't think the unions or the depositors or the bankers or the MPs have big issue on that.
There's no bona fide concern.
But the subtle way, Mr. Faraz, what they're trying to introduce, take over the powers of the central bank, monetary board, that has to overlook the granting or approval of any debentures or any such loans being issued.
Right. That's where the
That is
problem
the crux of the issue.
The way I understand it, and as has been reported by the press and widely written about by our friend and regular guest on here, Mr. Newsfirst.lk, the way I understand from his writings is that the debentures at the moment, you need the concurrence or you need the permission of the Monetary Board of Sri Lanka and the Minister of Finance before one can proceed with these the issuance of these long-term instruments for borrowing purposes. And apparently the key part of this amendment to the Act is that they are trying to do away with the need to obtain the concurrence or the permission of the Monetary Board of Sri Lanka, to leave them aside. Is that about right, my understanding?
That is exactly what I started to explain. Just correct what you're saying.
Right.
Now this section has remained in the legislation right through, whether it's a UNP government or a progressive government, whichever government, eminent, outstanding men of our civil service and politics.
Yeah.
Honorable Ronnie DeMel was a minister, finance.
Yeah.
He may have been brought few proposals, but this was never touched because the central bank of the country and the monetary board has to play the key role in monetary policy.
Right.
Now you take it out and you appoint your own board.
Yeah.
They have done enough damage, Mr. Faraz.
Yeah.
Billions in the last 4 years.
Like what?
Billions.
Like what?
Giving loans to a sugarcane power project in Sierra Leone. I don't know whether
in
that's
Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone.
But this
quite okay if it exists in Maldives.
Right.
Sad to say, this is people's money, government's money, taxpayers' money.
So they basically robbed.
What have robbed them? It's robbed and it's unaccountable. And the boards are appointed by the minister. Now minister takes off the powers of the central bank. He is trying to say, approve this legislation under the pretext of increasing capital.
Which on its own isn't a bad thing.
No problem. Debentures have to be guaranteed only by the government.
Yeah.
Shares have to be guaranteed by the government. Now, eventually, it can lead finally to these shares and debentures could be placed before the stock market.
Newsline welcomes questions from our viewers. Please SMS your questions to 0772 300 305. A card should be coming up on your screen. We're in conversation with Mr. Dinesh Gunawardena, and the subject thus far is about the proposed amendment to the People's Bank Act. Now then, Mr. Gunawardena, is there at the moment all such instruments are guaranteed in effect by the state?
By the state, because...
So what about in this amended version?
The guarantee goes out, Faraz, when you give full autonomy outside the central bank system.
Right.
It is a finance ministers come and go in this country.
Yeah.
And they have played enough pandu.
Yeah.
I don't want to mention names. It's been discussed. We know what happened to the central bank, and we know the bond scan through what we are going through.
Although the bond scam happened when the central bank had been removed out of the purview of the Ministry of Finance.
Out of the purview of the
for the first time since
under the direction of the Prime Minister. It was under the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Again, the so-called directors were appointed by the Prime Minister to the People's Bank.
Right.
He would have said, okay, appoint them as chairman, appoint them as directors. The investors being granted loans in this manner, who's answerable? Who's answerable? And when a bank collapses, this is the issue. When a bank collapses, the state has to move in and protect it.
To be fair,
are we wanting People's Bank to collapse in the end? We may, I guess government won't last for long.
Yeah.
As you mentioned at the beginning, no government, no parliament, no sensible legislators
Yeah.
allow serious legislation during election time. That has been the norm of the day. Norm of the day. Even the British Prime Minister wants Parliament to be silent during Brexit.
Well, that's
discussion.
that's
Also a key issue.
That's, of course, it's a key issue. I was going to say that's one hell of a democracy.
Yeah,
It
so-
is not, proroguing Parliament is not the first choice of a 21st century Prime Minister.
I mean, Prime Ministers come and go in Britain, but the system continues. Here, Prime Ministers don't come and go.
They come
The
and they
ministers
try to stay
don't
on.
come and go, but they destroy the institutions that is for all, for the nation. People's Bank is one
So
institution.
some of these loans that you say, some of these advances or facilities that have been granted where the investment is outside the territorial waters of Sri Lanka, like in the Maldives, like in Sierra Leone and some other places in Africa, and who knows, perhaps in other areas of the world too.
Yeah,
but these
no one
are,
knows.
how closely linked are these to the intent or the spirit of the intent of setting up the People's Bank?
These are all devious ways of siphoning off money to various
Don't you feel
favorites who want to
do you not
take it
have
out.
any disgust for what's going on?
It is discussed. We have fought against this bond scam, the three key areas of the bond scam. Nothing has happened. And the economy is suffering today because of this situation.
But it's absolutely near criminal for these people to carry on. Because if you remember with the bond scam, the first bond scam happened, and then there was no attempt whatsoever to move Arjuna Mahendran, the rogue governor of the central bank, as it's now held by Presidential Commission, right? The Prime Minister went out of his way. Newspaper after newspaper printed and TV networks carried what he had to say. He said there was no evidence. So he became, at that moment in time when he pronounced that there was no evidence, he acted as though he was the judge and the jury and the police investigators and everything all rolled into one, into the persona that is Ranil Wickremesinghe. How can he do that? That's not democracy.
If I may add,
Yeah.
I asked the first question on this in Parliament from the Prime Minister. Who takes responsibility for Mr. Arjuna Mahendran being appointed to the central bank as governor? And with these things, charges and the events that have taken place, he said, I take full responsibility. It's in Hansard.
Yes, he
It's
said,
in
I
Hansard.
insisted on the change of the system. But this system is the same system that Gamini Vijayasinghe, that wonderful former Auditor General, he said that the system that was in place until the end of 2014 and had started in 1997, I think, in that same system, he said, was the least cost method of raising funds for Sri Lanka. And this is said by the Auditor General of the country.
Of the country, less damage, the least damage.
Yes,
that can
he
happen.
said it was the best way
But
of
now
raising money.
the bond scan is exposed enough.
Right.
The
But
President has said, I told them not to appoint this man. You see? So the battle between the President, Prime Minister and the set of ministers has done enough damage to the economy of our country. People are suffering. Entrepreneurs are suffering. Bankruptcy are coming in. How can we save People's Bank? A key bank, if it goes out of control, Mr. Faraz, it will be another catastrophe that is going to hit the monetary system. So I think the private sector, business world also should awaken themselves of this danger. Give us time. If you want to raise capital, we are ready to support. Don't try to take off the powers that have given protection, security to the People's Bank for its functioning.
the questions are coming along, and there's actually also a call that the deputy leader of the United National Party must give his opinion on privatizing the People's Bank. Thank you for that suggestion. The question will be posed at some opportunity. But Mr. Gunawardena, the People's Bank was set up to help the development of Sri Lanka's economy in certain sectors like in agriculture and so on. You are now telling us that the People's Bank, having evolved, have now advanced monies to various presumably entrepreneurs for projects overseas. I suppose this is good and prudent banking encouragement and banking practice, is it?
Growth of a bank
Yeah.
to the stature of reaching an international dealings
Yeah.
is that is our pride of the People's Bank, of a state bank.
But when it
But
all,
it has been done in a proper manner. The board of directors, some of the directors had even objected, it's minuted, not to go into unforeseen circumstances or institutions which are asking for our money. It was all overruled and granted these bank loans. What is the use of any deputy or leader of the UNP asking questions? They are party to all this happening. They have been party to all this happening, and they continue. The thing is how you grant an investment loan. Then there has to be a special protective clause brought in that this type of nonsense cannot take place.
Because
You appoint your own man, you appoint your own man as chairman, who does know head or tail of running a bank and running a key bank of the state, international bank. People's Bank is international, from the poor to the international level. How can you run a bank? Private sector runs banks in a much more honorable, accountable, professional, experienced people.
Are you saying that some of these advances given for projects overseas, out of Sri Lanka's territorial waters, have gone south? Have they've started developing trouble, have they? Some of these loans?
Yeah, the Auditor General has exposed. It's not what we are saying. It's in billions. So we can go into the matter. If the Parliament COPE committee goes into this type of matter,
so what's
immediately
the point?
the COPE summons and goes into this manner, I think the COPE must go in immediately, which they have not done, sorry to say. This is how Parliament also is misled. It's a very serious issue. Lanka in crisis. In crisis. I mean, I know, the country knows that they have virtually escaped some of the key places of landing when they were threatened, of seizure.
Indeed.
It's our money,
Yeah.
state money, bank money, people's money that have been given loan by loan. What have they done over the 4 years? They've been talking and talking.
Well, of course, the UNP-led government isn't solely responsible to the calamitous state of Sri Lankan Airlines, because we did have previously a planter with close connections to President
I agree with
Rajapaksa.
you. I agree. Professionally qualified should take over. Who took over? The UNP government said professionals will come.
Yeah, maybe their first chairman from the UNP-led government, perhaps he was professional enough to sell a rather pretty good cup of coffee. But as far as running an airline, I'm sorry, but
No, I don't want to comment. The era has to come to an end, and
how can this era come to an end when we have an acute lack of democracy within the two? Let's just take the two major parties, the so-called SLFP/SLPP. Let's talk about the SLPP. They seem to be in the news so much, and the United National Party. Where is the democracy, Mr. Gunawardena? Where is democracy? The United National Party, well, let's go to your side. The SLPP, supposedly formed within an ambience of a democracy. Then, almost tongue-in-cheek, you have various people, supposedly members of this party, saying that, the leader, the candidate will be announced by will be decided by Mahinda Rajapaksa and will be announced by him. Excuse me, where is the democracy? Where is the rank and file members who are able to vote on this? Have they actually voted? Or like like lambs to the slaughter, have they been taken down and and said, oh well, yeah, you've made your mind up. They didn't even have a little democratic voting like President Daniel Arap Moi did long years ago, when he got them all to come to Uhuru National Park, and they all stood in queues, and he said, well, this queue is if you agree with us, and the other queue is if you don't.
You and I have seen Nairobi and Kenya. Let's not discuss how democracy functions.
Yes, okay. But what I'm trying to say
in the
is
United States.
Yes.
What happens in the primaries?
Yeah.
Now,
that's
all
what
that
I
is
mean.
good debate.
Why
good
can't
debate.
we have things like the primaries? Why can't the membership, the wider membership of the United National Party or the SLFP or the SLPP or whichever party, the JVP, why can't they have sort of primaries at each district level, if you want to get really deep into it, or even at a provincial level, and have primaries and let the rank and file members of your paid up members of your party choose their leader and choose the candidate to lead them. If for whatever reason, it's very odd anyway that your leader is not the candidate.
And that is the whole thing.
That's the whole
leader has been deprived of running for the presidency. Obviously, then the leader has to consult his local branch members, parliament members, and name a candidate. This happens in India, this happens here, all over. What you're saying is good. It's to the election commission. They're also talking on a lot of things.
But why the elections commission? Why can't that be adopted within all the parties?
Yeah, it can be adopted. The election commission has been established for certain purposes. They must guide the political parties which have existed for long. People have only got used to voting. After voting, they have no influence over the decisions.
Now I want to ask you something.
We have a referendum clause, which was only enjoyed by the president.
Yeah.
Why not have a referendum clause where the Supreme Court can order a referendum without the Parliament deciding? We don't have such a clause. I mean, maybe when we go in for massive projects, massive loans, the right of a citizen, I mean, you can muster, say, a few millions of signatures. Supreme Court must give a hearing. Not only the President and the Prime Minister and parliamentarians. What has happened? Today we have no peace elections.
That's what I was going to ask you next.
This is, in this crisis, they are trying to rush through People's Bank's death penalty. That is what they are trying to do.
But they also sounded and knocked the death penalty right on the people's head already, because with this worst sort of legislative piece of document ever, which must have been this provincial council's business, the Supreme Court now ruled that you can't have it under the old system because there's a system in place, and that it was supposed to be debated in Parliament. It wasn't, and then the rules say you got a committee headed by the Prime Minister should make their recommendations within 2 months and then send it to the President, who can then make a proclamation based on those recommendations.
Right.
Well, as you know and I know and everybody else knows, that 5-member committee headed by the Prime Minister has not delivered. They haven't done anything about it. They're supposed to have done it within 2 months.
Within 2 months.
Therefore,
1 year has lapsed.
Right.
Not 2 months,
therefore,
1 year.
1 year has lapsed. So therefore, isn't it quite correct to say that it is Ranil Wickremesinghe as the Prime Minister and 4 or 5 others in this blessed committee which has never done anything, that they are responsible for the fact that you cannot have PC polls? Can't citizen Sri Lanka, can't citizen Gunawardena or anyone, can't they go to court and take action against the Prime Minister for his inaction?
There should be some provision. People must go and demand the Speaker for what he has been doing.
Yes.
Why did not he make the announcement? Why did not he make the announcement when we were questioning for the last 12 months? The Speaker was saying, no, next month went, one after another.
But this is the same Speaker who's trying to lead the country.
I don't know about that. That's a UNP affair.
Right, that's UNP affair. Well, I don't
want to comment.
But no, but it's back to the same thing. Why can't you have primaries? Then you can sort the boys out from the men.
It's good. It's good proposal by you. The
You
election
can also
commission-
sort the butterflies out of flowers and all sorts of things.
Why not?
You know, you can have the flowery club on one side, you can have the butterflies on the other side. But we need clarity. We need clarity.
Now we are going in for the presidential election.
Yeah.
Just 5 weeks.
But don't you find it
nominations.
odd, Mr. Gunawardena, don't you find it odd that the leader of a party is actively finding somebody else to contest? Because why? Why would you do that? Are you frightened that you'll lose? Is that why? Well, you must have an opinion on it.
You mean the incumbent?
Yes.
Incumbent Prime Minister, leader of the United
Yeah,
Nations.
why let's be up front.
There is a
Ranil Wickremesinghe is
big
leading
debate,
UNP.
big debate whether he should be the candidate or not. According to what
If he's-
we
if he's-
get to know,
But isn't it better if he doesn't have the confidence to run for the presidency, and he's displayed his lack of confidence twice now, right? So if that's the case, why doesn't he, you know, as Upul Jayasuriya said, have you heard what he said, Upul Jayasuriya?
I have heard what Upul Jayasuriya said last week, and I've been hearing what he have been saying 4 years ago. So,
But he said about the milk.
inconsistency of some other professionals have caused this debacle of our country.
Upul Jayasuriya said that even a packet of milk, after its expiry date on the shelf or in the fridge, that packet of milk, the contents, it's not entirely wasted. It has its uses. It has its uses for things like cockroaches, geckos, mice, and so on. So, you know, the little vermin can have a taste of this milk, which would be, not fit for human consumption. So I think what he was trying to say is that even political leaders have an expiry date, other than that chosen by the Lord Almighty.
It's good, I mean, good statements. What he should have proposed is that the UNP and the opposition must pass a resolution calling upon the President to dissolve Parliament. Why can't they say that? If the Prime Minister has failed and if they want a new leader, why don't we ask the people through a Parliament, new Parliament? Why isn't that being proposed? That being blocked by eminent, sorry to say, my good friend Upul Jayasuriya took the other side and said no elections for 4.5 years. These are the people, the great lawyers who came and argued that no elections.
That's the other point.
Yes.
The people of Sri Lanka never voted on a fixed term of parliament. That's how it is. That's how I see it. They didn't vote for a fixed term of parliament.
Right.
But we have now ended up de facto with a fixed term of parliament.
Body scans and robbery of banks.
Well, yes,
and
we're stuck with all that.
For 4.5 years, and the president is accusing one party,
But the president's
others are
tied up.
accusing another party. You see, the disaster of April 21st, can the country forget this? Nothing has happened. They say everything is good. I say, Faraz, everything is not good. Economy is in serious crisis. A serious crisis. And it's because we study, you study, see what's happening in the US now. See what is happening in China, how it would affect the international systems, monetary, trade. We will suffer. The Prime Minister will say, I have enough in the reserves. How much does he have in the reserves which have been borrowed? You see, how much has been taken out? Just to
all in all, a very sad situation that we in Sri Lanka find ourselves in, basically.
Very much, very sad. It's a national interest that comes more than party loyalties. That's why I agreed to come to this program. People's Bank has to be protected. Professionals, union, retired people, all have said, if these amendments go through, debentures and shares will end up in the stock market and bought by private sector or perhaps even foreigners.
I have something to say here to you. This all started with Mahinda Rajapaksa breaking the SLFP and therefore making President Sirisena rather weak. And as for our Prime Minister, the only thing he can say, even though he's a minority sort of Prime Minister, the only thing he can say, this is the man who has led his party for 25 years and he can't get his own mandate. So when he becomes the Prime Minister, what does he say? The only thing he can say is like some cheap barroom entertainer stand up in Parliament and say, "Cow the horror." You know, what absolute rubbish do we have in terms of leadership? Now then, I have another question. This one's for you. Are you
The rest was your comments.
I want to know whether you are not frustrated yourself by not being named as the candidate for presidency.
Not at all.
Why?
I have worked in the opposition. I brought the opposition together in the most difficult time when the opposition was on the retreat.
But you've been
I
loyal to
headed
the country, Mr.
Yeah, my
Gunawardene.
loyalties are to the country and the people and the
So why
philosophy
don't you want to lead it?
and the policies that I have stood for.
Why didn't
Not for
Rajapaksa
office, I
nominate
had-
you?
That's a question that was discussed within the parties that
And how did he slip out of that one?
no, he had to take a decision after discussing with all. So the decision has been taken.
I'm back to my thing about the primaries.
Primary is a good thing if we can bring it in for all the parties to learn the way.
Like the rest of Sri Lanka, we here at Newsfirst, we're with you.
wish you-
And I do, it is frustrating for me to sit back and watch you not being nominated to run and lead the country, because you have the political fever to do that. And you need that una, you know, you need...
Una.
Yeah.
Now it's Una is on,
Deshapalana
the
Una.
green side Una is on now.
Well, Dinesh Gunawardene, it's been most enjoyable having you on the program. We appreciate the early morning start, and we hope that you'll live even closer to the studio so that you can get here more frequently. But thank you. And that's the way it was. Thanks for putting up with us in this extended version of Newsline this morning. Take care, have a wonderful day, and of course, God bless.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.